Desmond Cole poured his wine over the old janitor's head. 200 guests laughed at the sight. A waitress named Kemi ran to help him. She was fired on the spot. Security dragged her sobbing into the freezing rain. She had one night to save her sister's life. Now, she had nothing. Have you ever paid a price for doing the right thing? Let me take you back to the beginning of that night before Desmond signed his $1 billion deal. Before anyone knew the old man with the mop owned the company he was about to sell. I'm Claude. On this channel, we tell stories about the choices people make when nobody is watching. This one stayed with me long after I first heard it. Stay with me to the end. Tell me in the comments if you would have done what Kemi did.
No one expected the fragile janitor was the actual billionaire buyer. Let us trace it back.
You think a pathetic waitress like you can read $1 billion valuation, get out of my sight, and take this useless old trash with you? Desmond snatched the napkin from Kemi's shaking hands. He tore it into shreds. 200 guests turned to watch. He lifted his crystal glass. Red wine hit the old janitor's scalp thick and slow, running down into his collar. The crowd laughed. Security grabbed Kemi by both arms and hauled her toward the service doors out into the freezing rain. Desmond straightened his jacket, satisfied. What he didn't know, the trembling old man he'd just humiliated, was the anonymous buyer pen already in his pocket, ready to sign the $1,000 000 deal that would end him. Wrong move. Desmond just humiliated the wrong man in front of 200 witnesses. Let's get into it. The Grand Horizons ballroom smelled like roses and money that night, thick perfume layered over champagne and warm candle wax. Kemi Adeyemi balanced a tray of 17 glasses against her hip. Her feet had gone numb an hour ago. She was 24, 5'4", and she had learned to disappear in rooms like this one. Felix Marsh, the floor manager, caught her elbow near the kitchen doors. His clipboard was already damp from his palms. "Eyes down," he said. "Don't speak unless spoken to. These people paid $40,000 a plate tonight. You are furniture Kemi. Act like it." She nodded once. She had heard it before at 3 other galas this year alone. Rent was $1,340 a month. Her sister's surgery needed $42,000 by the end of the month, and Kemi had $611 saved. The math never stopped running in her head, not even here, not even now. A woman in emerald silk snapped her fingers without looking up. Kemi crossed the floor. She refilled the glass. She said nothing. A man beside her laughed loud enough to turn heads, then flicked an olive pit onto her tray like she was a bin. She said nothing to that either. Felix watched from the corner arms, crossed jaw tight. He wasn't protecting her, he was watching for a mistake. Near the far wall, under a table draped in white linen, something moved. An old man in a gray janitor's uniform knelt on the marble, mopping up a spilled martini with a rag that had gone gray from use. His hands shook, not from age, Kemi thought. From cold, maybe, or exhaustion. Nobody else in the room seemed to see him at all. She watched him for 11 seconds before she moved. Felix's voice cracked behind her, low and sharp. "Where are you going? That's not your section." She kept walking. Her tray stayed steady, 17 glasses, not one tipped. She knelt beside the old man on the cold floor, ignoring the silk hems brushing past her face, ignoring the murmur of guests stepping around the two of them like they were spilled liquid themselves. "Let me help," she said. The old man looked up. His eyes were pale gray sharp in a way that didn't match the rest of him. Tired, worn, but not slow at all. "You'll get in trouble," he said. His voice was quiet, steady. "I'm already in trouble," Kemi said. "Might as well be useful while I'm at it." She took half his rag and worked the stain from the opposite side. The marble was freezing under her knees. Somewhere behind them, a string quartet slid into something slow and expensive, and glasses kept clinking, and nobody in that ballroom noticed a waitress and a janitor scrubbing the floor together like it mattered. Felix appeared at the edge of the table, his face red, his mouth already open to bark her name. He stopped himself. Too many guests nearby. He settled for a glare instead, sharp enough to cut, and turned back toward the bar. The old man's rag brushed her knuckles. "Thank you," he said. Just that. Nothing more. Kemi shrugged. "Anyone would have done it." "No," he said, quiet as a blade. "They wouldn't." She didn't answer that. She smoothed her apron and lifted her tray again like nothing had happened. But the old man didn't go back to his mop right away. He watched her walk across the room, weaving between silk and cologne and careless hands carrying 17 glasses without a single spill. He watched the way she moved, the way she didn't flinch when a guest waved her off like an insect, the way her jaw stayed tight, but her hands stayed gentle. He was still watching an hour later when the financial charts came up on the screen near the stage and his pale gray eyes tracked the numbers the way a man tracks something he already suspects is wrong. But Kemi had no idea the old man holding the mop was auditing more than just the floor. Kemi found 5 minutes near the kitchen doors, tray finally set down, feet aching under thin black shoes. A discarded printout sat abandoned on a service cart. Someone's financial prospectus tossed aside between courses like trash. She picked it up without meaning to. Her eyes moved down the columns out of pure habit, the way some people can't help finishing a crossword left on a train seat. The numbers didn't add up. She frowned at the page. A shadow crossed the linoleum beside her. Arthur, the old janitor, limped closer, mop resting against his shoulder like a walking stick. Up close, his uniform hung loose on him, gray fabric worn thin at the elbows. "Something wrong with it?" he asked. Kemi glanced up, startled. "It's nothing. Just numbers." "Humor an old man," he said. "I never went to school for any of this. Explain it to me. Simply, if you can." She almost laughed, almost said no, but his eyes held something patient, something that made her forget for a moment that she was supposed to be invisible tonight. "Fine," she said. "Sit." There was no chair, so he leaned against the wall instead, arms folded. She pulled a paper napkin from her apron pocket and a pen from behind her ear chewed at the cap already. She smoothed the napkin flat against the cart. "This," she said, tapping the printout, "says the company's revenue grew 40% this year. That's the headline number everyone in that ballroom is going to clap for. And it's wrong. It's inflated." She wrote a quick formula on the napkin, small, careful numbers in blue ink. Real growth, once you strip out the one-time licensing deal they buried in a footnote, comes out closer to 10%, maybe 11. Arthur said nothing. He watched her hand move. 30%, she said almost to herself. 30% of that growth story doesn't exist. It's smoke. Across the hall, Desmond passed by the kitchen corridor on his way to greet another cluster of guests, cologne trailing behind him like a warning. He slowed. His eyes caught the scene through the open doorway. A waitress and a janitor heads bent together over a napkin like two people who thought they belonged in the same conversation. His mouth curled, disgust plain and unguarded. "Fascinating," he said, voice dripping with something that wasn't a compliment. "The help holding a seminar." Neither of them answered him. He didn't wait for one. He kept walking, already bored, already certain nothing in that corner could matter to a man about to close a billion-dollar deal. Arthur watched him go. His jaw tightened just slightly, then eased. "Show me again," he said to Kemi. "The part about the footnote." She did. Her pen moved fast now, confident the way it never was when she spoke out loud in that ballroom. She wrote out the valuation formula from memory, adjusted for the inflated retention numbers Desmond had flashed on the screen an hour earlier. She circled one figure twice. "There," she said. "That's the number they don't want anyone doing math on. If you strip the fake retention rate out, the whole valuation drops by at least 300 million. Arthur was quiet for a long moment, long enough that Kemi looked up, worried she'd said too much, worried some invisible line had been crossed. "How old are you?" he asked instead. 24. "Where did you learn to read a balance sheet like that?" "Community college," she said. 2 years. Couldn't afford the third." She folded the napkin once, twice, tucked it back into her apron like it was nothing. "Doesn't matter now. I carry trays." Arthur's expression didn't change, but something behind his pale eyes did. A kind of quiet recalculation, the sort a man makes when a plan he thought was finished suddenly needs revising. "It matters," he said. "More than you know." She didn't answer that either. A bell rang somewhere near the bar, 3 short chimes, the signal for staff to return to the floor. Kemi straightened her apron, picked her tray back up, forced her shoulders into the same practice slump that made her forgettable again. "Break's over," she said. "Try not to fall in this time." "I'll do my best," Arthur said. She walked back into the noise and the perfume and the clinking glass, 17 more orders already stacking up in her head. Arthur stayed by the wall a moment longer. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his own pocket, the private valuation report his own team had prepared weeks ago, and set it beside the numbers he now carried in his memory from a napkin. They matched. Almost exactly. His hand for the first time all evening stopped shaking. What Desmond did not know was that his billion-dollar secret had just been unraveled by a waitress on the back of a 2-cent napkin in less time than it took him to cross a hallway. Desmond took the stage at exactly 9:42. 200 guests turned their chairs toward him at once, glasses lowered, quiet as a class settling for its favorite lecture. He didn't need a microphone. His voice carried on its own trained, unhurried, the voice of a man who had rehearsed humility and discarded it years ago. 18 months ago, he began. We were 4 people in a garage. A pause timed. Tonight we're closing the largest deal of my career. Applause rippled through the room. Kemi stood near the back wall tray, balanced against her hip, watching the screen behind him light up with numbers she already knew were false. Retention, Desmond said 94%. Year-over-year growth 40%. He let the second number hang in the air like perfume. Numbers most Silicon Valley darlings would kill for. Leo Reyes, seated at the front table, raised his glass without standing. "Best deck I've seen all year, Desmond. Numbers don't lie." Laughter, warm and easy, moved through the crowd. Desmond smiled at that, the kind of smile that had never once doubted itself. Kemi's jaw tightened. She thought of the napkin folded in her apron pocket, the circled figure, the $300 million of air holding up every word coming out of his mouth. She thought about saying something. One sentence. That's all it would take. She said nothing. Rent was due in 6 days. A man near the front gray suit, quiet voice raised a hand. "Quick question on methodology. How are you calculating retention exactly?" "Cohort-based or trailing 12-month, Desmond didn't blink. "Cohort-based," he said, "smooth, immediate. We track every user from sign-up, no exclusions, no adjustments. That's a hard 94%. I'd stake my name on it." The gray-suited man nodded, satisfied, and lowered his hand. Kemi's stomach turned. She knew from the napkin math, from the footnote Desmond's own team had buried, that no such cohort tracking existed. The real number came from a rolling average that quietly dropped churned users out of the count each quarter. A trick, a clean, deliberate trick, and he had just described it under oath to a room full of witnesses on the record, smiling the entire time. She looked toward the back corner. Arthur stood near a service cart mop forgotten against the wall, his pale eyes fixed on Desmond with an attention no janitor should have had. He didn't write anything down. He didn't need to. His face had gone very still. "So," Leo said, standing now, glass raised higher, "let's talk numbers that matter tonight." 1 billion, that's the ask, and frankly, Desmond, I think it's low. The room erupted. Champagne flowed toward the stage in a wave of refilled glasses. Kemi moved through it with her tray, pouring for hands that didn't look at her, catching fragments of praise that made her want to scream. Visionary. Genius, really. The next big thing. Words tossed around like confetti, landing on a lie nobody in that ballroom had bothered to check. Felix appeared at her elbow, voice pitched low and urgent. Table 6 needs refills. Now Kemi, not in 5 minutes. She moved. She always moved. That was the job. At table 6, a woman in sapphire earrings was mid-sentence to her companion, oblivious to the server refilling her glass. Did you see the retention slide 94%? My fund would kill for that kind of number. Kemi poured, steady-handed, silent. The wine came up close to the rim and stopped there, perfect, controlled. Her hands didn't shake even as everything else in her wanted to. Behind her, Desmond raised his own glass toward the crowd, soaking in the applause like sunlight. To the future, he said. To the numbers that got us here. 200 glasses rose to meet his. Kemi stepped back into the shadow near the service door, tray empty now, chest tight. She thought about the napkin again. The formula. The $300 million hole hiding under 40% growth like rot under fresh paint. Nobody else in that room could see it. Nobody wanted to. Arthur caught her eye across the crowd just for a second. He didn't smile. He gave the smallest nod, the kind meant for exactly one person. She didn't understand it yet. She only knew the champagne kept flowing, and somewhere under all that gold light and easy laughter, a $1 billion lie had just finished writing its own signature on tape in front of 200 witnesses who would remember none of it as anything but a party. Felix cornered Kemi by the bar. Table 2, Desmond's private table. Go. She didn't argue. Her tray held 4 glasses red wine poured to the exact line management demanded. She crossed the floor, chin down, feet quiet on the marble. Desmond didn't look up as she approached. He was mid-story, gesturing wide 3 investors leaning in around him. She set the first glass down carefully. Second glass. Third. Her apron pocket caught the table edge. The napkin slipped free. It landed face up, blue ink bright against white paper right beside Desmond's hand. Kemi froze. She reached for it fast, too fast, murmuring an apology nobody asked for. Desmond's fingers closed over the napkin first. He lifted it, curious, expecting nothing. Then he read it. His face changed. Not anger yet. Recognition. His eyes moved over the formula twice, then a third time, jaw tightening with each pass. "What is this?" he said, flat, quiet in a way that was worse than shouting. "Nothing, sir. Trash. I'll take it." "This," he said, "is my cohort model." He held it up between 2 fingers like something diseased. Written on a napkin, by a waitress. The investors around the table went quiet. Leo set his glass down slowly. Desmond stood. His chair scraped hard against the floor. 30%, he read aloud, voice climbing. Inflated by 30%. You wrote this? Kemi's hands stayed still at her sides. I was just clearing the table, sir. Don't lie to me. His voice cracked louder now, sharp enough to turn heads 3 tables over. You think you understand my business? You think 2 years of community college makes you qualified to question $1 billion valuation? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He crumpled the napkin in his fist. Know your place. That's all anyone like you needs to learn. Know your place and stay in it. Felix arrived at a fast walk, face pale, already reaching for Kemi's elbow. Sir, I am so sorry she'll be reassigned immediately. She'll be gone, Desmond said. That's what she'll be. Kemi didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on the floor, on the wine stains spreading slowly across white linen where his hand had knocked a glass, sideways. Arthur watched from the corner mop, still in hand, body motionless. His grip on the handle tightened, knuckles whitening, but he didn't move. He didn't speak. Not yet. Desmond straightened his jacket, smoothing the front with 2 sharp tugs. Around him, the table had gone silent, 20 guests nearby, pretending not to listen while listening to every word. Get back to work, he told Kemi, and stay away from my table for the rest of the night. She nodded once. Yes, sir. She turned and walked tray-empty spine straight until she reached the service corridor. Only then did her hands start to shake. Felix followed her voice, low and furious. What were you thinking? Writing on his numbers, are you insane? I wasn't trying to embarrass him. Doesn't matter what you were trying to do. Felix wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He's going to remember your face now. Men like that don't forget. Kemi leaned against the cold tile wall, breathing slow. Her sister's hospital bill sat somewhere in her phone, still unpaid, still counting down. $42,000. 6 days. She thought about the napkin crumpled in Desmond's fist, evidence of a truth nobody wanted spoken tonight. Arthur appeared at the end of the corridor a few minutes later, mop bucket rolling ahead of him. He said nothing about what had happened. He only looked at her steady, unreadable, the same quiet weight in his pale eyes from the kitchen doorway. "You should be more careful," he said finally. "I know." "No," he said. "I mean it. Careful men like him don't forgive being right in public, not from someone like you." She almost smiled at that bitter and small. "Someone like me." "Someone smarter than him," Arthur said. "That's the part he can't survive." He didn't wait for her answer. He wheeled his bucket back toward the ballroom, leaving her alone with the hum of the freezer units and the distant sound of laughter starting up again beyond the doors, like nothing at all had just happened. But something had. Her brilliance had been undeniable for exactly 9 seconds. In that room, 9 seconds was long enough to become a target. The final contract came out at 11:15, carried on a black lacquered tray by one of the hotel's senior staff. 200 guests turned toward the stage again, drawn by the sight of thick cream paper and a gold pen resting on top of it. Desmond stood near his private table, glass in hand, chest puffed with the particular pride of a man watching his own coronation. "Gentlemen," he said loud enough to carry, "we sign in 10 minutes. Arthur moved along the edge of the room, mop bucket rolling ahead of him on quiet wheels. He kept his head down. His pace stayed slow, deliberate, the pace of a man who had learned exactly how to be overlooked. The wheel caught on a seam in the marble. The bucket lurched. Arthur stumbled, hand shooting out for balance, and the mop handle clipped the leg of Desmond's chair. Wood scraped against stone, sharp and sudden. The room went quiet. Desmond turned. His eyes found Arthur, immediately, mop still in hand, head already bowing in apology. "I'm so sorry, sir," Arthur said. "So sorry. I didn't see the table." 200 guests had gone, still, glasses paused halfway to their mouths, waiting. Desmond set his glass down on the table. Slowly, too slowly. "You didn't see," he repeated. "A grown man mopping a floor for a living, and you didn't see a table the size of a small car. It won't happen again, sir." "No," Desmond said. "It won't." He picked his glass back up, crystal heavy, catching the chandelier light in 100 small fractures. Red wine sat still inside it, dark as old blood. Arthur straightened, bracing. Kemi saw it from across the room, tray forgotten in her hands. She started moving before she understood why. Desmond lifted the glass higher. "Know your place," he said. He poured. Wine hit Arthur's scalp and ran thick and cold down through gray hair over his forehead into the collar of his uniform. He didn't flinch. He didn't move at all. He stood perfectly still under the flood of it, eyes closed, jaw tight. Laughter broke first from somewhere near the bar, then more of it spreading table to table, uncertain at first, then loud, then loose with champagne and cruelty. Desmond set the empty glass down. He wiped one hand against the other, satisfied, like he'd just finished a chore. "There," he said. "Now you'll remember." Kemi's tray hit the floor. Glass shattered against marble, 4 glasses gone in an instant, wine spreading in a dark stain across white tile. Nobody looked at her. Every eye in the room stayed fixed on the old man dripping red at the center of the crowd. She ran to him anyway. Felix's hand shot out, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. "Don't," he hissed. "Kemi, don't." She pulled free. Arthur opened his eyes as she reached him, wine running down past his jaw, dripping onto the collar of his ruined uniform. He looked at her, not at the laughing crowd, not at Desmond straightening his cuffs a few feet away, just at her. "I'm fine," he said quietly. "You're not." I've had worse. She pulled a cloth napkin from her apron, the clean one, and pressed it gently against the side of his head where the wine had pooled thickest. Her hands didn't shake now. Something in her had gone very calm, very still, colder than the room around her. Desmond watched the two of them for a moment, amused. How touching, he said to no one in particular. The help taking care of the help. 200 guests laughed again on cue like he'd told a joke. Arthur's pale eyes lifted toward Desmond just for a second. There was nothing frightened in them, nothing broken, something else, something that looked, if anyone had bothered to notice, almost like patience running out. As the red wine dripped onto the floor between them, Desmond believed he had won. He had no idea he had just signed his own destruction in front of 200 witnesses who would remember this exact moment for the rest of their lives.
Absolute disgusting cruelty. Desmond poured wine over a fragile janitor just to flex his power. If that were me, I would have exposed his fraud to the entire room. Imagine working your whole life only to be treated like garbage by an arrogant CEO. His downfall is approaching fast.
Man, absolute disgusting cruelty. Desmond poured wine over a defenseless old man just to flex his power. If that were me, I would have exposed his fraud to the entire room. Imagine working your whole life only to be treated like garbage by an arrogant CEO. His downfall is coming fast. The laughter hadn't even faded when Kemi dropped her cleanup rag and knelt beside Arthur again, dabbing wine from his collar with the napkin she'd already ruined. Around them, 200 guests watched like it was theater, like it was included in the ticket price. Desmond hadn't moved. He watched her tend to the old man, something cold flickering behind his eyes. "Leave him," he said. "Come clean my shoes instead, since you clearly have nothing better to do tonight." Kemi didn't look up. "No." The word landed on the room like a dropped glass. Desmond's mouth twitched, the smile gone now, replaced by something tighter. "Excuse me, I said no." She stood slowly, napkin still in hand, red-stained. "Your numbers are a lie, sir. 94% retention doesn't exist. Neither does your 40% growth. I checked the math myself, so did he." She nodded toward Arthur without looking away from Desmond. "You can pour wine on both of us. It won't make the fraud disappear." Silence swallowed the ballroom whole. Felix appeared at her side so fast he nearly stumbled, face, bloodless hands, already reaching for her arm. "She's confused, sir. She's exhausted. We'll get her off the floor immediately." "No," Desmond said. Quiet now. Quieter than before, which was worse. "Let her finish." Kemi held his stare. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. "I'm finished," she said. Desmond turned to Felix. "Fire her." Felix's jaw worked, no sound coming out at first. "Sir, she's one of our best." "Fire her," Desmond said again, "or you can join her outside." Felix looked at Kemi for exactly 1 second, something like an apology flickering across his face before it hardened into obedience. "You're terminated," he said, "effective immediately." The words hit harder than the wine had hit Arthur's scalp. Kemi felt them settle somewhere behind her ribs, cold and permanent. 2 security guards moved in before she could speak again, one hand closing around each arm. She didn't fight them. There was no point. "Wait," Arthur said. Nobody waited. The guards pulled her back through the crowd, past silk gowns that stepped aside like she carried something contagious, past tables still holding half-finished glasses of the same wine that had been poured on his head an hour ago. Arthur rose to his feet, wine still dripping from his chin, and took 1 step after her. A guard's hand landed flat against his chest, stopping him cold. "Not you too, old man," the guard said, almost bored. "Sit back down." Arthur's jaw tightened. He said nothing. He watched the doors swallow her, watched 200 faces turn back to their drinks like the moment had already been forgotten, filed away as the night's entertainment. Desmond straightened his jacket, satisfied, already reaching for his glass again. "Where were we?" he said to Leo, smiling like nothing at all had happened. Near the service corridor, Kemi's heels dragged against marble as the guards hauled her toward the back exit. She thought of her sister's face, thin and pale, in a hospital bed 300 miles away. She thought of the $611 in her account, of the $42,000 she'd never see now, of 6 days that had just become zero. If you want to see Desmond get exactly what he deserves, you know what to do. Now back to Kemi. The doors ahead swung open onto a wall of cold night air. Rain hammered the alley beyond, hard and gray under a single flickering security light. "Please," she said, voice cracking for the first time all night. "My job. I need this job." The guards didn't answer. They never did. Thrown toward the freezing night, she thought her life was over. She had no idea that somewhere back inside that warm golden room, the universe had already started tallying its debt to her, one silent old man at a time. The rain hit her first, then the cold, then the concrete when the guards let go. Kemi's knees scraped against wet stone. Her palms came away raw gravel pressed into torn skin. Behind her, the service door slammed shut, muffling the music and laughter back into something distant, something that belonged to a different world now. Felix stepped out a moment later, umbrella already open over his own head, none offered to her. He held her small handbag by 2 fingers like it might stain him. "Here," he said, dropping it into a puddle at her feet. "Don't come back. I'm putting a note in the system tonight. Every hotel in this city will see it by morning. Felix, you made your choice in there." His voice was flat, tired, already turning away. "I have 4 kids and a mortgage. I can't afford to make yours." He disappeared back through the door before she could answer. The lock clicked final and small under the roar of rain on the dumpster lids nearby. Kemi stayed on her knees for a long moment, rain soaking through her uniform, through the thin fabric to the skin beneath. Her hands moved without her gathering scattered items from the puddle. A hair clip, $11 in loose bills already soaked through. Her cracked phone screen, dark corner chipped from the fall. She pressed the power button. It blinked once weakly and lit. A text sat waiting at the top of the screen, time-stamped 6 minutes ago. St. Vincent Medical Billing. Final notice. Balance of $42,000 due by Friday, or surgery scheduling will be canceled pending payment plan review. Kemi read it twice. The rain didn't stop. Her hands didn't stop shaking, not from cold anymore. Through the cracked service door 30 feet away, Maya watched from the gap left by the swinging hinge. Her own tray sat forgotten on a nearby cart, 4 drinks going warm inside the kitchen's heat. She'd seen the whole thing from the corridor, Felix's umbrella, the handbag in the puddle, Kemi kneeling in the rain like something discarded. She wanted to run out. Her feet stayed planted on dry tile. "Maya," a cook's voice sharp from somewhere behind her. "Table 9's waiting." She wiped her face with the back of her wrist quick before anyone could see and picked her tray back up. The door swung shut between them, cutting Kemi off from the warm light, 1 final inch at a time. Outside, Kemi pulled herself upright against the brick wall, palms stinging where the gravel had bitten in. She looked down at her phone again, at the number that might as well have been written in another language now. $42,000. She had $611 in her account and 11 wet dollars in her hand. She thought of her sister, 17 years old, 300 miles away, waiting on a hospital bed for a surgery that had a countdown clock attached to it now. She had failed. The word sat heavy and simple in her chest, no room for anything softer. Rain kept falling harder now, running in cold lines down the back of her neck, soaking through the thin soles of her shoes. She had no coat, no umbrella, no job, no references, no plan. Somewhere behind the hotel's brick wall, muffled by stone and glass, the party kept going, oblivious, warm, gold-lit. She could still hear the faint edge of string music through the door if she listened. She stopped listening. She sat down hard against the dumpster, knees pulled to her chest, and let the rain do what it wanted with her. The cold rain masked her tears, but a storm of absolute justice was already gathering inside the hotel, 3 floors up, in a room where an old man in a ruined uniform had just picked up a phone. The narrator has to admit something here. I wasn't sure how far to take this scene. Some stories you soften the bottom. This one I couldn't. Because somewhere out there, Someone sitting in a doorway right now feeling exactly this alone. The storm worsened past midnight wind, driving rain sideways into the alley in hard, stinging sheets. Kemi had stopped shivering an hour ago, which frightened her more than the shivering had. She sat wedged between the dumpster and the brick wall, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tight around them. Water pooled beneath her, soaking through the last dry patch of her uniform. Her fingers had gone numb somewhere around midnight, too. She'd stopped trying to warm them. $11 sat crumpled in her fist, soaked through, useless. No bus would take wet bills tonight, not this late, not this far from downtown. She thought about calling someone. There was no one left to call. Her mother had died 4 years ago. Her father had left before that. Her sister lay in a hospital bed 300 miles away, waiting on a surgery that required money Kemi didn't have, and now, apparently, a job she no longer had either. The brick behind her felt like ice through the thin fabric of her uniform. She pressed her spine harder against it anyway, as if pain could anchor her to something. Somewhere down the alley, a stray cat picked through an overturned bin unbothered by the storm. Kemi watched it for a while, envying in some distant corner of her mind an animal that only had to worry about food and shelter tonight. She had worried about those things too. She had lost that fight. Her phone screen had gone dark again, battery drained past saving. The last thing on it had been the hospital's message. $42,000, Friday. She didn't need to see it anymore. It was burned into her, now permanent as a brand. She closed her eyes. I don't know if I should tell you what she was thinking in that moment. Some things feel too private, even in a story that isn't real. I'll just say this. She wasn't thinking about anger anymore. She wasn't thinking about Desmond or the wine or the 200 people who had laughed. She was thinking about her sister's face, the way she used to laugh before she got sick. She was thinking about how tired she was, and how the tired had stopped feeling like something that would ever end. The rain kept coming. Her breath slowed. Somewhere in the deepest, quietest part of her past, the cold, past the ache in her knees and the numbness in her hands, a single thought surfaced. Small, steady, the kind of thought that doesn't announce itself. The old man's voice from hours ago in a kitchen corridor that felt like a different lifetime now. It matters more than you know. She didn't understand why she remembered it now. She didn't have the strength left to wonder. Her eyes stayed closed. Her body had stopped fighting the cold, stopped fighting the exhaustion pressing down on her chest like a physical weight. She let her head rest back against the brick. This is the part where I'm supposed to tell you it gets better. I will, but I want you to sit in this for one more second first, because she didn't know it gets better. Not yet. Right now in this alley, in this rain, all she knew was the cold and the silence and the sense that she had run out of doors to knock on. Somewhere far above her, past 3 floors of stone and glass and gold light, a phone was ringing in a room that smelled faintly of spilled wine. A man in a ruined uniform picked it up on the second ring voice, low, urgent, already giving an address. Kemi didn't hear any of it. She had already closed her eyes, breath shallow, spirit worn down to something small and quiet and very close to nothing at all. But just as she took what felt like her final breath, the heavy metal groan of the hotel's back security door echoed through the alley, cutting through the rain like something waking up. Kemi's eyes opened at the sound of the door. Light spilled into the alley first, warm and yellow against the rain. Then a voice, sharp and familiar, cutting through the storm like it had every right to be there. Get her inside, now! Hands lifted, her careful, urgent, nothing like the hands that had thrown her out 3 hours earlier. Someone wrapped a coat around her shoulders, heavy and dry, smelling faintly of cedar and rain. She blinked against the light, too weak to ask questions, too cold to do anything but let herself be carried. Inside the ballroom, the party had reached its final act. Desmond stood near the head table, pen in hand, the thick cream contract spread out before him. 200 guests had gathered, close glasses raised, waiting for the signature that would make him a billionaire twice over. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "the future of this company begins in exactly..." The grand doors at the far end of the hall swung open. Nobody moved at first. Nobody understood what they were looking at. A man walked through the doorway in a charcoal bespoke suit tailored to the inch, flanked by 4 security officers in dark suits of their own. His silver hair was combed back dry now, his posture straight in a way the frail janitor from 3 hours ago had never once managed. Arthur. The room went silent. 200 faces, frozen mid-motion glasses, paused halfway to open mouths. Desmond's pen stopped an inch above the paper. He laughed short and uncertain. Is this some kind of joke? Security, get this man out of here. He doesn't belong. He belongs here more than anyone in this room, Arthur said. His voice carried differently now, still quiet, but with a weight that filled every corner of the hall. My name is Arthur Whitmore. I own Meridian Capital. I'm the anonymous buyer you've spent all night trying to impress. The color drained from Desmond's face all at once, like someone had pulled a plug behind his eyes. That's not possible, he said. His voice cracked on the second word. You're the janitor. I poured wine on you. You poured wine on the man signing your billion-dollar check, Arthur said. Overzealous, I believe, was the word you used earlier tonight, describing your own confidence in these numbers. He held up a folded napkin, faded blue ink, still visible across the creases. Hold on to that word. You're about to hear it mean something very different. He set the napkin down on the table beside the contract. Same handwriting, same circled figure. $300 million of air laid bare under the chandelier light for 200 witnesses to see. Cohort-based, Arthur said. No exclusions, no adjustments. A hard 94%. Your words spoken under oath tonight in front of every investor in this room. Desmond's mouth opened. Nothing came out. My team ran the real numbers 3 weeks ago, Arthur continued. I already knew your growth was inflated by 30% before I ever walked into this hotel. I came tonight to see what kind of man was selling me a lie. He glanced toward the back of the room. I found out everything I needed to know when you poured wine on an old man's head for the crime of bumping a chair. This whole thing is rigged, Desmond said, voice fraying at the edges. She wrote that napkin, not me. She's the one who... That's not a mistake, Arthur said. That's a pattern. 23 deals in 18 months, all built on the same fabricated retention model. My legal team has the paper trail. Every one of them. He picked up the thick cream contract from the table. He tore it once, then again the sound sharp and final in the silent room. The pieces fell to the marble floor, scattering near Desmond's polished shoes like confetti from a party that had already ended. You're finished, Desmond, Arthur said. The deal is dead. Every fund in this room will hear about tonight by morning. Security guards, the same two who had dragged Kemi through the rain, stepped forward at Arthur's signal and took hold of Desmond's arms instead. He didn't fight them. He didn't have the strength left. Wait, Desmond said, voice small, now unrecognizable. Wait, we can talk about this. I can fix the numbers. You had your chance to fix things 3 hours ago, Arthur said. You chose wine instead. The guards pulled him toward the same service doors Kemi had been dragged through earlier that night. 200 guests watched in silence, the same silence that had once laughed at an old man's humiliation, now heavy with something closer to shame. Felix stood frozen near the bar, face pale, hands trembling around a tray he'd forgotten he was holding. Arthur turned toward the crowd. Bring her in, he said. The doors opened again. Kemi stepped through, wrapped in the borrowed coat hair, still damp cheeks pink from the warmth finally returning to her skin. She stopped when she saw 200 eyes turn toward her, the same eyes that had watched her thrown out into the rain. Arthur crossed the room and took the folded napkin from the table, holding it out to her. This belongs to you, he said, though I think you'll need something bigger to write on from now on. Kemi took it, fingers brushing the same creases she'd folded 3 hours earlier, back when it was just scrap paper and honest math. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. I'm building a new division, Arthur said, loud enough for the room to hear. Forensic valuation, rooting out exactly the kind of fraud you caught tonight before it costs investors like these another cent. He held out a leather portfolio thick with paper embossed in gold. I'd like you to run it." The room stayed silent, but it was a different silence now, the kind that comes after something breaks open rather than shatters. Kemi looked down at the portfolio, then up at Arthur. "I only have 2 years of community college." "I only have a mop and a rented uniform," Arthur said. "Tonight, apparently. Credentials mean less than you'd think." She took the portfolio. Her hands finally were steady. Near the doors, Maya watched from the kitchen entrance, tears running freely down her face, now no longer hiding them. She stepped forward out of the shadows she'd stayed in all night and crossed the room to stand beside Kemi. Nobody stopped her this time. Felix set his tray down slowly and said nothing at all. There was nothing left for him to say. 6 months later, on a rain-soaked evening, not unlike that one, Kemi Adeyemi walked through the same hotel lobby wearing a charcoal suit of her own, a leather portfolio under one arm. A young waitress passed her, carrying a tray of 17 glasses, shoulders slumped, feet clearly aching. Kemi stopped. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper napkin, blank clean, and held it out. "If the numbers on that screen ever don't add up," she said, "write it down. Someone might be watching who matters more than you think."
Have you ever risked everything to do the right thing? The events in this story are a work of fiction, but society's class divide is real. My heart breaks for the unrecognized genius hiding in plain sight. I have often stayed silent just to keep my job. Would you have defended the old man against the billionaire? Share your thoughts below, and please subscribe to our channel for more stories.